Welcome back to the channel, fellow aviators. I am excited to be back with you. Before we get going, let's just take care of a couple admin items. First and most importantly, if you find some value in this content or you enjoy it, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment. It really does help out the YouTube algorithm for the channel. Second, down in the description, you will see a link to my Discord. Feel free to join, hop on board. Just looking to create a community of like-minded gamers who enjoy almost all types of simulation games. We've got stuff in there for DCS, Microsoft Flight Simulator, American Truck Simulator, iRacing, a lot of stuff I don't even have time for right now, but as the channel evolves, so will the Discord as well. And then finally, coming up for myself, and I'm really excited, is going to start doing some live streaming. So I'm just working on the final touches of that. I think I'll start off with the Airbus, the 320. Obviously, it's what I fly, what I'm most familiar with. So hopefully I don't screw that up too much. All right. In terms of NeoFly, as you see, as we look over on the left-hand side here, I've increased the range out to about 600 miles, and that's just for my own sense, so I don't have to sit in front of this desk for hours at a time. But our range is, let me just double check. I think it's close to 1,400 miles. Yeah, 1,450 nautical miles. And you can see down below, I have full fuel and I still have over 1,000 pounds of useful cargo that I can take, cargo or passengers. So if we look over at the rewards, we're looking at anywhere, if we take this very first one, I'm just under that. I could unload fuel, but that'll bring us up to Washington. We can head down to Mexico. There's a couple of different places we can go. I thought we'd just head out to the east, kind of get away from California, start going to some different places that can bring us up to potentially Canada, maybe deal some cold weather ops as we move into winter. We'll see. We have a lot of different options here, and we can make a lot of different money. And my main goal, of course, is in that last episode, we had to take a $500,000 loan, and I'd just like to get that paid off as quickly as possible. Don't forget, on top of that base reward in this flight here, looks like almost 27,000. We should get another, I think, is it 20%, because we got 2 stars on our check ride, which is the reason you want to do very well on. So that's what's going on within the game. Having said that, on that last episode, we flew the stock Baron Bonanza. I'm sure I made it abundantly clear how unimpressed I was with that aircraft. Well, today, of course, we're going to be flying the Black Square TC version, which is the turbocharged version. And I'm excited to show that to you. So let's just head out to the aircraft. Let's get started and underway. About 2 weeks ago, I did a first look at it. As always, I don't really mention this, but I try to break up almost all my episodes into chapters. So if you happen to watch my first look and you wanted to skip some of it, feel free just to move through the chapters. That's why I do that stuff for you guys. So anyways, let's just head out to the aircraft and let's get going and do our very first flight in a twin. Very exciting. All right, see you in just a second. All right, folks, we're out on the flight line now. I'd just like to point out there's not a whole lot we need to do in terms of the overall pre-flight, unlike the A2A products in the Comanche, and we'll probably see the Aero 600 when I fly that later. If there was one complaint you can make about Black Square, is that the pre-flight walk-around's really not that comprehensive. If you remember from the Comanche, and it carries over into the Aerostar 600, you can check fuel contamination, oil levels, condition of the oil. Here, what we're really pretty much limited to is just removing the chocks. We can remove the inlet covers. These actually rotate if you'd like them to. Obviously, you could drop the flaps and turn on the landing lights, but I think in the interest of time, why don't we just go ahead and get going? As always, as I mentioned in my Bonanza video, the heart of the Black Square products is going to be their tablet interface. And from here, if you haven't seen my first look, you do have the ability to change the GPS on the fly. Just put in whatever you like, and it will swap it in real time for you. If you want, you can even drop out and take out all the GPSs if you so like. In an aircraft that's probably turbocharged here in the 2000s, I don't probably see that happening a lot. It maybe if you're flying the initial version that had the non-turbocharged, the non-pressurized version, you might have this kind of this setup here. But we're just going to run the 730 and the 650. If you guys remember from all the videos we've done, we've had a unique and varied set of autopilots, and probably for the first time, we're going to have a fairly decent one. It does have a little bit of a quirk in the altitude pre-select mode, but I'll show you how we get through that later. There's a couple other things you might want to put in here for realism. That cloud strobe effect, that's something that happens in real life as you enter the clouds. You'll actually have the strobes reflect off the clouds and then back into the cockpit. It's very disorientating. Normally just turn that stuff off. I leave it on there, just a little bit more realistic. You can have it loaded with the chocks and the covers deployed and some VR stuff, but that's pretty much, you can look through that at your leisure. The payload, I've already gone through and loaded up the fuel and weight for the NeoFly mission. Left and right engine, we can see the compressions, the electrics, the cabin, and here we'll be able to, since it's fully modeled, we'll be able to check our oxygen, we can check our temperatures. If we're in the pressurization version, it would actually let us know how well we're doing there. And then, of course, the last page is the failures. It's what I used in my first look here on the Baron. I don't do a whole lot of failures. If someone wants to ask me to show something, I'm probably happy to do that for you guys. Coming from the airlines, everything's really highly regimented. There's not a whole lot of guessing. And so unless I have a procedure to follow, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be doing a whole lot of the failure stuff. As I did in the last video, I did cut off an engine just so we can see some single engine work. This aircraft flies very competently, especially if you keep it above that blue line. If we look at, or I'm sorry, the red line, if we look at the airspeed indicator, that is your minimal controllable airspeed with a single engine or the critical engine inoperative, and the blue line would be your preferred climb airspeed. So anyways, that is what the tablet looks like. Let's just kind of move on and start up with our checklist. So luckily for us, the black square stuff is fully compatible with the interactive checklist. So we'll start off with the pre-flight inspection control locks. Let's get that removed. Seatbelts, cabin doors, parking brake is it set? Yep, set now. All right, parking brake, avionics, breakers, all in. This is the great thing about having an interactive checklist. You can just move right over to it. And because it is a black square aircraft, I highly recommend making sure all your circuit breakers are in. This happens in the real world. Circuit breakers kind of trip. And if you don't check, you'll be in for an exciting flight. All right, so oxygen pressure just right above that COM circuit breaker. We have plenty of oxygen in there. It has, or it does, I should say, model oxygen consumption per occupant per density altitude or pressure altitude. So once we engage the oxygen, it will start to decrease. I love the black square stuff, really do. Avionics are all off. Throttle. Can I remember all my keybinds? Oh, look at that, I can. All right, so throttles are going to be closed. Propeller is in the high RPM position. And our mixture needs to go to full rich. Cowl flaps go into the open position, which will be fully down. That is open. That is off. All right, so propeller, mixture, cowl flaps, aileron trim. We have rudder, aileron, and pitch right here. Landing gear is down. Make sure it's in the down position. All sub-panel switches off. Let's come over here, and we're just going to remove that. And that's all these right here. And you can see it's really nicely color-coded for us. We've got our battery and electronics right here, avionics master, all that stuff, prop sync right there. Green is our fuel boost, air conditioning here in the black, white are all of our light switches, and gold will be all of our anti-ice stuff. Sorry, I need some caffeine. All right, so static air source, that is going to be just right down here. Let me just highlight it with my mouse right there. There's your static air source. That's is in the correct position. And then if we look at our CO2 detector right over here. Just press in. It's hard to see in the light, but just make sure those lights go on. Yes, this will simulate a carbon monoxide leak. Once again, because we are dealing with black square. All right, so let's see, is it 4, 3, 2? Let me guess. There we go. Just keep pushing numbers here. All right, there's our fuel selectors are in the open position, and then we are going to turn our, let me turn all these other lights off here. We'll turn our beacon light on and our battery. And we're looking at our bus volts. If I remember, I'll do this in when I edit the video, but underneath the fuel gauges, you'll see the bus volts down below. We want more than 23. We have that. And then just above those, we'll look at those a little bit later. Alt load, those for our alternators left and right. When we go through the run-up, we'll actually have to check over there. So when you hear me say we're doing the alternator check, that's kind of where you want to put your eyes. All right, enunciators. Let's come over here. We will look down, and our enunciator is right here beneath our gold flip switches. And we'll just turn all of our enunciators on. Make sure all the lights pop on. They do. And then we'll put our left and right alternator on. Cabin heat, as desired, we got 60 degrees. We're here in Modesto, California. We'll definitely need some as we climb up, but for now, we can just leave that as is. Left and right. We're just going to check the boost pumps, and all we're going to listen to, we'll put it in the low position. We're just going to check, see if we can hear the sound. Okay, left and right boost pumps in low position works, all audible. And that concludes our before start checklist. All right, so the engine start for cold. These are very highly modeled. So if it's cold, warm, flooded, you see there's a whole list. You'll actually probably need to use that checklist, but we haven't flown this aircraft, so it's gonna be nice and easy for us. So we got the mixture is full rich, right propeller is in the high RPM, right throttle is full open. Let's do that. And we will put our right fuel boost pump on, and now we're going to count 1001, 1002, 1003. We're looking at our fuel flow. That checks. Put our throttle back. Turn on my track IR, and now we're just going to go ahead and start. And you may need just to move your throttle around just a little bit to get it in the right position. No two starts are really ever going to be the same. All right, so once we do that, we're going to just come down and check our engine oil pressure and temperatures gauge at the very, very bottom. And we'll look for our cylinder head temperature to come up as well. And those are all in the green. So let's move through this real quickly. We can check our bus volts, 28 volts, that checks. And our alternator load on the right-hand alternator is less than 25 amps, and we have that. And we're just going to do the exact same procedure. So we're going to put full forward. We are going to turn on the left, low, high, 1001, 1002, 1003. And now we will start. Close that down, crack it.
You're good to go. Contact the tower for clearance.
Right around 1200 RPMs or so. We can crack the window open here, so listen to all that goodness here in a second. All right, left mixture, left propeller, fuel flow, left boost pump, all that stuff. We're all in the green over here. Looks good. All right, back down to 28 volts, and our instruments are checked. All right, so that is the engine start sequence cold before takeoff. Mixture, we're gonna put mixture at full rich. Now, we are flying this turbocharged version. If you just watch my Bonanza video that came out on Wednesday, I talked about the turbocharger being turbo normalized. And what that meant is it's just going to supply sea level pressure all the way up. This is a traditional turbocharger, which means if we look At the very top, the two sets of lines right under the A320 sim, those are our manifold pressure. You see it goes all the way up to like 39.6 or whatever. That is and it's going to stay there, unlike a turbo normalized, well, they say that 3 times as fast, where it just keeps right at sea level pressure, which is like 29.92. Beneath that is our engine RPM. Below that is our fuel flow. Then we have our oil temperatures and pressure, cylinder head temperatures and pressures, our T's and P's. So, all right. So anyways, let's go mixtures, max power, oil temperature. We're looking for 24 volt or 24 degrees minimum. We can come down here. So we see temp, they're both over 40 right now. And we'll want our boost pumps are off, air conditioning off, landing light. We're not going to do, or we're down to before takeoff. All right. So we need an after start. Let's get on the right one. Jeez. All right. Let's go to landing lights. Let's turn them all on. I don't pay for the bulbs. Weather radar. We'll come over here and we can put our weather radar. It's in the on position. Turn avionics master on. Let me see what self-test in progress. One of the things you can do, let's see if it will let the camera move over here. Sorry for the noise. But if we go into the nav mode, this is how we can repair the aircraft engine. So you see left engine, right engine 100%. You can repair it. We can refill the oxygen. We can recharge our batteries. We can do that on the tablet as well, but this is how you would do this actually in the aircraft. A little nice need to know thing. All right, so weather radar is on, avionics are on, cabin air and heat is desired, air conditioning mixture, lean for taxi. So as I was talking a little bit earlier, we've got a turbocharged versus turbo normalized. Both of them give us the ability that we're not going to have to deal with the fuel air mixture unless we get all the way up to the critical altitude, which will be 20,000 feet on a standard day. We're probably not going to be anywhere near that, but we'll probably level off here around 17,000, 15,000, something like that. Or if you reduce the throttle a little bit. So it's really meant to run wide open. And if you do that, you don't have to mess with the whole mixture leaning like we would normally do in a normally aspirated engine. And the same thing works if you're flying the Bonanza, even though it's turbo normalized. Boy, I say that 3 times as fast. So in any event, so parking brakes are off, and parking brake and brakes are checked. Okay, so that is what we're going to do for the run up. And let me just we got a lot of flying to get through, so I'll just meet you at the runway just before we're ready to do the run up. All right, so see you in just a few seconds. All right, everybody, I am back with you, and let's do the run up checklist. So the parking brake is set, the annunciators, we've already checked those, the remote compass, that is right next to the airspeed indicator, just to the left, and the switch is in the left-hand position or the slaved position. You should never need to move that. The mixture, we push those full rich, and now you know, about 1700 RPM, right about there, and I can now close this window. Just want to give you guys so you can hear it. And in fact, we can turn on our headphones and really knock down that sound. All right, so it's 1700 RPM. Now, I have set up my magnetos, which is fairly simple to do as long as you have a modifier. So I'm using the bus 2 switch on my Honeycomb Alpha plus the ignition switch, but I have broken those apart so I can start each engine individually. If you are curious on how to do that, somebody asked me in the comment section in my first look video. I talked them all the way through it. If you find that video, if I remember, I'll leave a link in the description. If not, hop on my Discord. I'll show you how to do it. It doesn't take a long time, but it does give us the ability, if we look at our magnetos, that we can check each individual engine. All right. So what we want to do, 1700 RPM, and all we're going to do is just check our props. So the usual, we'll pull it down. Pull it down. I do 3 times what I did in my Mooney. Make sure you get all the oil up into the hub there. You don't really want to hang out there either. So it's just kind of down and back up. And now we can check our magnetos. And back to both. Pump these up just a little bit more. So down to 1500. We're right about there. All right. And once again, we'll check. This will be an indicator if you've got fouled plugs. If you get a really bad magneto drop, either you've had a magneto failure or more than likely it's going to be the plugs are fouled. And you just clean them in the tablet. All right. So let's check the other engine. All right. That checks out. So we've done all this stuff here. Instrument air, let me just show you where it's at. It's going to be right there, instrument air. Let's zoom in right there. Just want to make sure that's in the green arc. That's what provides the vacuum for your artificial horizon. All right. And then we are going to come down, zoom out here a little bit. We're just going to look down at the alternator load, and we're just going to take our left one on. Light comes on. We're looking that the left one goes to 0. Turn it back on, same thing. Goes to 0, lights on, perfect. Go through all these real quickly. Go through these, and then we get on. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start doing all of our anti-ice stuff, which are a prop. We look down right above the mixture controls. Prop amps go up, that works. Do the same thing with the windshield. You're going to see a slight increase in the alt load. You see it goes up there a little bit. Same thing with the stall warning heat, fuel vents, pitot heat. In fact, I think they want you to leave them on technically. All right, and then the last thing we're going to do is right next to all these gold ones, this one right here says surface. These are going to be our boots, so you're going to see right above here, this de-icing, you're going to see that go into the green. And then what we're going to want to look at is, as I come out here, we're going to want to look at our boot. So we'll turn that on. We get an increase there. We look on our boot, and if you can see on the black there, you can see some ridges. And what we should see there if we wait is it cycle through, and now the ridges disappear. And that's how you break off the ice off your wing. All right, so that is all done, and I think we can bring our power back down here. All right, so I think that is all done. Pitot heats, amp meters checked, fuel checked. All right, throttle set to 1,000. Right about there, a little bit low. Bring it back up to 1,000. And then the last thing we're going to do here is the autopilot check. And we're just engage the autopilot, hit heading, and then you want to rotate. We can bring it back. And then we can click once to disengage the autopilot. But if we look at our artificial horizon, see the flight director bars are there. If you engage it just once, the autopilot will still be working. It'll just be working with the flight directors. And if you want to get rid of that, you click it one more time, and that's how you get rid of the flight director. So hit it twice, or you can just hit the flight director button right here. So however you have it mapped out on your yoke. I think it's one thing I need to do still. Sorry for all the clicking. All right, so we will put one notch of flaps in. Windows are closed. Yep, that's important. If you haven't experienced that yet, if you try to take off with the windows open, you will get a crash. All right. Not a computer crash, just it'll reset you. Just making sure my yoke is attached to the desk. Yes, I have done that. Altimeter is set to field elevation. So let me hit my button real quick. I've got my altitude set. We're just going to go right up to 16,000 feet. Takeoff heading, we'll do that once we get there, and we can turn on our landing, get all the lights on. We've done that because I don't pay for the bulbs. That's what I tell you each and every time. All right, let's get ready to go. And here we go. If you are confused where the taxi lights go, just put them all over. Put them in the middle of the taxiway. Do a couple over here, a couple over there. 2 right there. Hopefully you're getting my sarcasm. All right, so let's get out onto the runway here. And it reminds me as I look up there at the annunciator panel, I've got all my pitot heats on, so let's just get those all up. I don't need those here in California. The general rule, at least what we use in the airlines, I think it says here 4 degrees Celsius. Really, you need 4 degrees or less than 10. We use less than 10 degrees Celsius and visible moisture, right? You're flying into a cloud, you have precipitation. All right, so let's sync up our heading. I've got our CDI pointed in the direction that we're supposed to be going out to our destination or our next fix. So I think we're ready to go at this point. So let's bring up our throttle, and then to avoid an over boost. Once you get to out here, just take it nice and slow. If you slam them up there, you might end up over boosting it, causing damage to the engine. So right about there. All right, and release. All right, looking for right around 80 knots, right about there. All right, positive rate. Gear up.
Have a nice flight. Just to remind you, we're not paying you for this one.
I don't know why they wouldn't. If they don't, it's going to be a very, very, very short flight. All right, so coming up on 500 feet here, what we can do is we can engage the autopilot. We can put heading mode on. And we can start a turn in the direction of travel. We're going to want to put our nav selector mode on there to make sure it's picking up the GPS signal. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how we select and maintain the proper altitude. So you see we have 16,000 dialed in here. That is the altitude that we set, but until we engage it, nothing is going to happen. So what we want to do is right click on this inner knob, and now you see vertical speed. That's what that stands for. Outer knob, thousands of feet per minute. And then the inner knob is hundreds of feet per minute. So you can, and then just to the left of those numbers is a little arrow, and that is in the up position. So that means that'll be a climb. And if we're descending, we'll get a slight down arrow, but you're going to have to physically make that happen. And at this stage, you're going to want to press engage. You'll see the nose pitch over for a 1,500 foot per minute rate of climb. I'm busy yippity-yakking here. Let's go ahead and pull up our flaps. All right, those are good. And if we look up at that altitude selector, we see vertical speed. We've got the arrow underneath it, and then it says arm. So we know we've armed the system. If we right-click again, we can set our altitude. So if you, let's say on the way up you wanted to change it, that's how you'd want to do it. But other than that, that is how you're going to select altitudes, which is very, very easy. All right, sorry, I was just looking at my NeoFly on another screen, and I don't know why it told me that they weren't paying me. You get concerned. All right, boy, looking at that temperature, we're at 126 degrees inside here. So tell you what, let's turn off our cabin heat. We can put our AC on. We'll turn our heater off for just a second. We look there, a little scoop just came up on top of the nacelle. Our blower on there. The other thing we're going to want to do, and we can do it now so we don't forget as we pass through 10,000 feet or so, this little green one here, that is our oxygen. We can go ahead and open that up. We have actually plenty, I think, for one person. I think we have close to like 9 hours. All right, as we look over at our GPS, we can see we're almost getting ready to intercept. So let's go ahead and select nav. And we have nav up here, GPS on our GPS unit, right? So it's showing GPS as opposed to VLOC suspend or whatever. And so we're now going to track our course all the way out, and we can just zoom out a little bit. We got a ways to go. One of the great things, one of the reasons I love using this, number one, is just how easy it is to find what you want, right? If you want to put it in your procedure, which I've already done while we were talking, your flight plan, all that stuff makes it really, really easy to use. On top of which is the ability to drag the screen around. I absolutely love that. So let's head back. So if you're looking for some speeds, right around 120 or so is probably going to give you your best rate of climb. We're using kind of more of a cruise climb, 1,500 feet per minute. And we'll just see, as long as we can maintain our airspeed, I'll just hold that for now. There is definitely a debate whether it's better to just climb up as fast as you can and then accelerate up there, or start your climb at a little lower rate, but you're going much faster while you're doing it. I don't know. I've been flying a long time. I still don't know. I prefer to go fast. So, all right, let's just look out here. All right, well, we're no longer 120 degrees inside the cockpit. We're looking at 89, so a little bit better. All right, coming up on 10,000 feet, and we can go ahead and turn off our taxi and landing lights. You can also turn on our prop sync. I think we can put that back on there, and we are underway. All right, so I think really at this stage, we're just going to skip out about 300 odd miles of straight and level flying. So I'll resume with you guys as we're probably maybe getting a little bit closer. I think we've seen this before. I might just give you a real quick, we'll just once again demonstrate how to use the vertical speed mode on that descent. And other than that, we will plan for the ILS into, I have no idea where we're going. So we'll get up to altitude, and I will see you all in just a few seconds. All right, everybody, I am back with you. You see, if we look at the GPS unit, that white dash or cross right in front of the plane there is what they're calling the top of descent, which makes sense. If we come back and look at the flight plan, you see we're about 38 miles out, and we need to get down, according to the chart, to about 5,000 feet. So let's go ahead and pull up the chart and brief this thing out so we can get rid of the background here. And so we're looking at the Twin Falls, Idaho ILS runway 26 approach. It's going to be a localizer frequency of 108.3 and a final approach course of 258. That is set in the GPS and in the HSI. Strike will be our light slope intercept at 5,800 feet. We'll call that roughly 6,000 feet with their decision altitude 4353, 200 foot on the RA. Airport elevations 4153, so we need to be fully configured right around 5,200 feet or so. And if we look at the MSA, we see it's 9,300 out to the west and south, 9,000 to the southwest, and 6,300 feet to the north. And if we look at the plan view, we see there's a fairly large mountain range just right in front of the approach. And so the plan is we are heading directly for strike right now. We're at 18,000 feet. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to go directly towards strike, but we're not going to enter the approach there because it might jam us up a little bit. So the plan is we're going to go past right over the top of strike and continue out a little bit more. And we're just going to kind of teardrop a right-hand turn right back into the final approach course there of 258. So since strike is, we'll call that 6,000 feet, we're just going to dial in 7,000 right now. We'll right click for the vertical speed. We'll dial in, let's start at 1,500 feet. We can always readjust it if we need to. As we get a little bit closer, we can modulate that. And we'll just hit engage. We're going to throttle back a little bit for the first time of this entire flight. We've been running the entire time basically full power the entire way. I didn't point it out, but we had almost 40 inches of manifold pressure the entire time. So up at 18,000 feet, I had bumped us up just a little bit higher as we were getting over the Rockies just to clear it a little bit more. So we're going to go ahead and start down now, and then looking at the profile view, like I said, we'll be at strike. We're going to teardrop around. Once we get down there, we should see Pappy's on the left-hand side, and the missed approach will be 4,700 feet straight out, and then right turn 7,000 feet on a heading of 020 to the Toxie intersection, and then hold, though. It looks like we're kind of in VFR conditions, so I wouldn't expect that. So once we get over the glide slope intercept, we're going to be roughly doing around 120 knots or so, descending, slowing down to around 100 to 90 or so. And just looking at the chart, that's going to be roughly 5.5 minutes once we hit that kind of that glide slope intercept. So, all right, so we're heading down now, and I'm just going to use the map just in our distance. If we could look at, oops, not the procedure, sorry. Flight plan, we still got 25 miles to go. So we need to get roughly down from now another 10,000 feet, and that's roughly 30 miles. So I'm just going to increase this to about, we'll use 2,000 feet per minute rate of descent. And so I'm just going to modulate all the way down. I just want to arrive a little bit over. I don't want to be right at 6,000 feet, right at strike as I make that right-hand turn. I'm not sure what the terrain's going to be like just to the south and southeast. So I'll be maybe, I don't know, 1,000 feet high if I need to. If it looks good, I'll just kind of continue down to that altitude. And like I said, once I hit over that course, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch us out of nav mode. I'm going to go into heading, just kind of parallel us downwind, and then basically make a U-turn. And the only thing we really have to consider is at a standard rate turn, it takes 2 minutes to make a 360-degree turn. And so in this instance, to make the 180, that's 1 minute, and we need to make a little bit more than that. So what we'll probably do is just once we head over once we get over that intersection there, right over the top of strike, we will then, I'll start my timer, we'll head out for about a minute. I'll then parallel us, 45 seconds, so I'll parallel us, and then I'll make the turn back in. You don't want to get too jammed up on the way back in. All right, so that is the plan. And other than that, it's been a really smooth flight. If we look down at our airspeed indicator, you can see we're just kind of creeping into the yellow arc, which is our maneuvering speed VA, and we can operate in that airspeed as long as we have basically not a lot of turbulent air. And as you can see, it's very, very smooth up here. So we're happy to operate up in there. Might as well take the free airspeed. All right, so I will check back in with you probably as we come up over the top of strike and for the entire approach. All right, guys, see you in just a second. All right, everybody, I am back with you, leveled off here at 6,000 feet. As you probably see, and the eagle eye among you during the brief probably noticed, I was actually heading direct to Sori, which is the initial approach fix, not the final approach fix. The altitude there needs to be 6,000 feet, so we're good. So what we're going to do is we come over the top here. I think we'll just use the exact same pattern. If we look down at our HSI, it's a little bit more than a 180-degree turn, but not by much. So I think we'll just go ahead and start our timer. We have up above the airspeed indicator, we've switched it the mode from GPS over to nav. If we look at our GPS, you see it's in VLOC mode. That's what we want. We also see that our localizer course, the Neo moved, and as we look at the HSI, we see 2 yellow indicators, and we are underneath the glide slope, and that's where you want to be. You don't want to try to capture it from above. It makes it a little bit harder. So at this point, all we need to do is extend a little bit out. I'd rather go a little bit long than cut into early, and then you're end up going past the localizer course. So it's just better if we make this a little bit longer. So we're coming up on about a minute now. So this is one of the ways you can use your chronometer if you like. And now let's go ahead and start. The turn all the way around. Don't need our timer anymore, so we can just ignore that. Let's look up and see where we're going. Though, as you do instrument flying, I tend to sometimes I forget and I start looking down at the panel because we really don't need a lot of that stuff. So, all right, anyways. All right, so that looks good, right? We have the needle displaced to the left or to the south, and we have a slightly on a southern heading. So that makes complete sense. And what we can do now is we can just come down here and hit, oops, not nav, approach. Wrong one. Let's go heading. There we go. Approach one more time. Minus the bad button pushing. And we'll just kind of sync up our heading here. All right, so we're coming up over SORI, the initial approach fix. Normally, when you make an instrument approach, just so you all know, you never really need to go to the initial approach fix. That's something you'll probably never do unless you are actually doing your actual instrument check right. All that stuff is, you always kind of cut it in between your final approach fix and SORI. But if you didn't have air traffic control or you lost comms, that's the procedure you want to use. All right, so as we got a little bit lower, it warmed up here. I'd made a real effort to maintain cabin temperatures, so we'll just use just a little bit of heat. Shut it all off completely for now. A nice 75 degrees in here. Passengers are happy. All right, so if we look up at our autopilot panel above the artificial horizon, we see we have flight directors, approach, alt, autopilot, and glide slope. So we have armed everything up, but if we look down at our HSI, right beneath our artificial horizon, you see we're still underneath our glide path, and that makes sense. So right at strike, it's 5,900 feet, and we have from SORI to strike is about 7 miles. So we still have a little bit to go. I think I see the runway straight ahead. And so the procedure is what I want to do is, we don't need to slow up too much yet. But we want to get underneath that white arc before we get those flaps down. And we'll probably only use 1 notch of flaps. We don't need, we don't have to use full flaps every time we land. So our biggest source of drag will be our gear, and I'm just going to wait till we get about between one bar above and the glide slope intercept. I'll probably just drop gear right about there, just so we have a little bit of drag as we start heading downhill. So old school, as soon as I got to strike, I would come down to my chronometer. I would start a time. It's yet another way for us to make sure that we are where we need to be. Though in the day of GPS, that just doesn't happen as much. That's a little bit older school where you'd actually time everything and use your vertical profile, which is kind of handy if you're making a localizer only approach. You have to kind of know those numbers. But anyways, let's just kind of start looking up here. All right, so glide slope intercept. Let's go ahead and drop our gear, and we're just going to pull back on power a little bit. All right, so we don't need that approach chart up here anymore. We can, in fact, turn on my track IR, center that up. All right, coming up on about 120 knots just inside the green white arc. Let's do our first notch of flaps. All right, they are in. At this point, you're just trying to get yourself nice and trimmed up and right on profile. Just gradually slowing up here just a little bit. 100 knots is maybe just a little bit fast. Looking up outside, we see the pappies on the left. We've got white over red, so that looks good. And then the only thing that we need to work on is going to be, check our gears down in 3 green, that is. Flaps are in. I don't want to go any slower than around 90 or so. We just need a descent rate on impact fleet per minute, less than 200, because we have fragile cargo. And if we look just to our bottom left, you see the radar altimeter, 400 feet, 200 to go. Should get a nice little flashing indication right there. 90 knots, looks perfect. So we'll just knock off the autopilot. See, we transition to all white. That's actually kind of normal. About 50 feet here, we'll just start rounding out our flare.
Nice landing, pilot.
Excellent landing, sir.
Contact ground for your parking assignment, then shut down your engine.
All right, we are in the middle of Montana. All right, so we're going places. All right, coming across the threshold here. Let's go ahead and bring our gear up. All right, everybody, I hope everyone enjoyed the flight today. This is, man, I can't even, it's really just a pleasure to fly. The aerodynamics feel good. It feels good. when you're making the inputs, the systems are nice. Quite frankly, after all the kind of weird and hokey, I think one of my subscribers said, unique autopilots, to actually, have something that's nice and easy to use for the change is great, which means we can and will start making some IFR flights. We'll go bring it right down to minimums and maybe do a couple different types of approaches. All right, so let's put our parking brake on, and then we can go ahead and just kill the engines.
Everything is on board.
And that is it. Everyone, thank you very much. I appreciate all the support. Channel's really kind of taken off, and it's all thanks to all of you. And I appreciate everyone who leaves a like, comment, and watches. Appreciate y'all. Have a great weekend, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care for now. Bye.